Evening, everyone, and thanks for logging on again for BBFA support. This is the fourth session now in the series of monthly webexes, which we're hosting here at Berks and Bucks FA to try and help support clubs and leagues around the county with aspects of administration, navigating grassroots football. Session this month is going to take a slightly different approach to ones that we've done over the first three months, in that we're moving away from discipline and misconduct, which we talked around for the first three sessions, looking much more around practical aspects of running the club, supporting the long-term sustainability. This month we're going to focus very much on volunteers. Now, we consistently receive feedback from clubs and leagues that one of the biggest challenges is around volunteer recruitment. And certainly it's sad to see clubs fold every year because of the financial administrative burden that is being placed on. Unfortunately, over the last couple of seasons, we have also faced leagues who are now unfortunately folding due to some of these constraints as well, or the impacts of losing clubs. So it is something which is very much seen as a critical issue for us here at Berks and Bucks, particularly around sustainability and structure, making sure we've got the structure underneath to help support volunteers and indeed assist clubs in recruiting new ones. What I can't promise this evening is a magic bullet or a secret tactic, really, that if you follow this, you will triple your number of volunteers. However, what I hope will happen over the course of the evening is that it will reframe perhaps some of the issues and offer new suggestions or approaches you might want to consider moving forward. So we're going to look at who volunteers and why, tactics around recruiting volunteers, effective management for volunteers, and then we will touch on what support we can provide here at Berks and Bucks FA. The first section is possibly a little bit stat heavy, but will only take about 5 minutes or so, but kind of shows that bigger picture, and we'll drill down really from national landscape right down to local football, Berks and Bucks, and look at some of the information we have around the national picture. Like I said, this we're going to start big and gradually work our way down. These figures are taken from some online research I've done over the last month or so around volunteer generally in the UK. So this is from the NVCO and the UK Civil Society Almanac. So this is all taken from 2017 to 18. During that period, 21.1 million people volunteered at least once over that 2-year period. Actually, 11.9 million people volunteered at least once a month. Now, these represent formal volunteering, so volunteering through a group, a club, or an organisation. So very much like a football club or a football league. Now, as I said, this is looking at structured, organised volunteering. It's 22% of the national population that are involved in this way. Actually, if we try and take that out from the formal kind of volunteering and look at informal involvement, that figure now jumps up to 53% of the population. So actually, when we look at it, over half the country is involved volunteering in some capacity on an annual basis. If we look at sports specifically, information available from Sport England back in 2016 shows that 5.6 million people volunteer in England in sports every single month. So the volunteers are out there. There are people who are looking to get involved. And what's particularly interesting and reassuring, really, is that according to NCVO, the National Council for Voluntary Organisations, those statistics have actually stayed relatively consistent since the turn of the century. So over the last 20 years or so, we're looking at the same kind of numbers year in, year out. Breaking it down now from sport in general towards football specifically, the FA have done a fair amount of research over the last couple of years into that grassroots workforce strategy. So these are figures of people who are involved in grassroots football across the country. Looking at 370,000 qualified coaches nationally, 27,000 qualified referees, 1,000 of which are in Berks and Bucks. So actually we've got a pretty good rate out of 50 counties, the fact that we have actually 1/27th of them. We're looking at 70,000 league and club key officers, and I'll come to what key officers covers in a few minutes. And then over 500,000 helpers and volunteers nationally. Really, football's in a bit of a strong position, particularly compared to other sports. There's a lot of passion around the game. There's a lot of people who are currently involved and who want to be involved volunteering in football. I need to try and drill down even deeper, and these are latest statistics around Berks and Bucks FA. So I've done some looking into the volunteers we have here in the county. What I will say is, I know I've got a couple of leagues on the call this evening, but I've kind of looked here around clubs specifically. Reason for that is we've got a much higher number of clubs than we do leagues, but also it's slightly more volatile, or there's slightly higher risk to us in terms of the sustainability of it. Has a much bigger impact. We've got 578 affiliated clubs this season, which equates to 2,250 key roles. Now, by key roles, I'm talking about chairs, secretaries, treasurers, and club welfare officers. Those are the four most important and key roles we have. Adult clubs, you have to have someone named as a chair, treasurer, and secretary in order to affiliate. And if you have youth clubs, you then have to make sure you have a welfare. Now, those 2,250 roles are populated by 1,654. Those are the people involved for us in those key. Now, what becomes a bit of a concern for us is when we drill down a bit into some of those numbers. We've done some analysis, and 30% of our clubs only have one or two individuals named across those key roles. I appreciate that may be two individuals named across the three key roles for an adult club. There are certainly a fair few clubs we have affiliated to Berks and Bucks FA, which are heavily reliant on one individual who is performing at least three roles in an adult club, or maybe performing roles in break that down into some further demographics based on the information we have on whole game system. Look at a couple of the divides here. It's overwhelmingly weighted towards male volunteers. About 75% of the volunteers we have in Berks and Bucks are male. The yellow are not listed, so this is where they haven't provided across the whole game system to be able to give us the category. If we then look at ages, we can see there's quite a large peak around volunteers in their 40s, so between the ages of 40. Now, this is quite interesting for us because actually this kind of bucks the trend from national statistics that are out there. Again, looking at some of the data available from NCVO and from Sport England, it's to be across wider industries, but wider vocations or wider categories of volunteering. Women are much more likely to volunteer than men. And the lowest rate nationally for volunteering across all sectors is in the 25 to 35 age bracket, which, as you can see, we're relatively healthy in. And the highest rates then are 65 to 75. We actually don't have too many volunteers running our clubs. What the data does kind of show us is that we are pretty much overwhelmingly reliant at the moment on male volunteers aged 40 to 49. That in itself doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. What I would say is, as far as a demographic goes, it's a relatively stable demographic. If you look at males 40 to 49, they're less likely to walk away due to external commitments around family care and responsibility, and also less likely to have to step away to health reasons, given the age. What our stats do show, though, is there's a slight aging demographic, and it does kind of highlight really that importance for diversity around trying to make sure we've got a diverse and inclusive volunteer. What the stats do also show, and a couple of areas I did want to pick up on though, is actually it does show that there are certainly younger people out there who are interested in volunteering. As you can see, we slightest bump of a line in the under 18 category, and that's actually, we've got two under 18s who are involved in some of our grassroots clubs. And we've got about 500 volunteers in total under the age of 40. Look at that 500 volunteers across 578 clubs that I mentioned earlier. That's a relatively healthy situation that we know there are volunteers coming through the system in those young. What I want to do now is just try and move on to a bit around some motivations that people have, why they get involved in volunteering in the first place. Numbers are up on the screen. I'm not going to run through them line by line and column by column, but just to explain where these numbers come from, it's from that FA Grassroots Workforce Strategy document that I mentioned earlier, and it is broken down by what they considered 4 of the most critical roles we have in grassroots football. So club secretaries, club welfare officers, CWOs, league secretaries, and fixture secretaries. I'm going to pull out a couple of themes from this, though, which I think are quite interesting aspects. First is that people genuinely do want to help. The highest percentage of surveyed, one of the reasons they've got into volunteering in football is they want to help. They feel like they can play a role in supporting the grassroots club. So people are out there and do want to get involved. Giving back is also a huge motivation. Stands to reason if you treat your members right, if you build that kind of passion and commitment and loyalty through the club, it may then stand that you'll be able to help some of those players perhaps, or supporters, parents, partners, family members, transition then into a volunteer role. Strong motivation to give back to the club and community. Also equally important when you look at it actually is giving back to the community as a whole. It may not necessarily be around football, but it's people wanting to feel that they're contributing to the local community, contributing to their village football team perhaps, or contributing to youth programs and youth work in their local community. It gives a bit of an inspiration perhaps that when you are looking at recruiting volunteers, the importance of looking outside of the club, but within that local community. And as you go through the season, trying to build some of those ties with the local community, not just focusing solely on those already part of the club. What I found also interesting is that the one of the common ones we hear is no one else to do it. Isn't actually as critical or as important as you may believe. There are motivations. People want to be giving back. That's a much stronger drive for volunteering. People wanting to help or stay involved in the game. The classic, if I don't do this, no one else will, is actually less of a motivator perhaps than you may originally have thought. There are a couple of other factors borne out in research as well about why people volunteer that may not be included on the survey from the FA. A couple I really wanted to pick up on really were looking at the huge potential that volunteering has to help people with gaining experience and professional skills. This is crucial, particularly if you think around some of the younger age groups. If you've got students playing in the club, doing GCSEs, levels, thinking about going off to university, volunteering in the club in an administrative role gives them an extra string to their bow when they come to writing university personal statements. It may also help them with showing a range of skills and experience on a CV if they're 16 and they're looking for a first job, looking to get a bit of income. So if you try and offer some of those opportunities out within the club, you may find that there are students who are happy to help out. Equally, if you've got members within the club who are struggling to find employment, and by giving them a volunteer role, it shows that to a prospective employer that they're committed to developing themselves, they're still learning, they're still active, they're looking to try and build up their CV and make themselves more employable, more attractive to potential. The other reason people volunteer that's not listed but is hugely influential, I think, is very much around wanting to help out, support their children or support their family members. Looking at a youth club and you've got parents that are coming week in, week out to support their children at the game, actually, as they become closer and more entwined within the club, there's an opportunity there that they may want to give back to that club. Structured, formal. Moving away from some of the inspiration about why people volunteer, I want to now look just around some of the challenges facing the existing volunteers. And again, this comes from that same workforce strategy. Probably no surprises here. The biggest challenge is around recruitment and retention. It goes to show really the scale of the problem and why it's so important that for us as a county FA, we help clubs and leagues in trying to look at how they are recruiting volunteers, find alternative strategies, and see if we can help support improve some of those numbers, and hopefully at least within Berks and Bucks, if not further, just try and reduce that as one of the challenges facing the leagues and clubs. Sorry. What is it that our volunteers do? You don't need me to try and explain some of the roles and responsibilities that you may well have volunteering for your local league. I think once you actually start looking at the huge range of responsibilities for volunteers, it goes to show the scale of exactly what it takes to keep football going. I know some of the things that are coming up on the screen and some of the volunteer roles are slightly tongue-in-cheek, but actually, how often as a club manager or coach do you end up having to play in goal? Do you end up having to wash the kits, scrub the boots, collect lost property after a game? You're there responsible for recruiting players. You're standing by the side of the field, and if you scored a goal, you've got to make sure that she's in a playable condition and clear off the dog poo and so forth. If you ask any one of our volunteers exactly what it is that they think they're doing, the response is actually they're there trying to support their club, support their league. They're trying to help. So that's the biggest driver. When you look at it from another angle, what they're actually doing, the game going, without the volunteers giving up their time on a Saturday and a Sunday, on a Wednesday night, training sessions, sat behind the desk trying to manage the team or text players on a Friday to see who's going to be able to get to a game on the Saturday morning, exist. Volunteers are crucial. They keep, as I said, they keep the game going. When we come to look at new volunteers and seeing how we can try and alleviate the burden on the existing ones, also obviously know your audience. Ask that question of actually who volunteers. Those of you playing WebEx Bingo who had 17 minutes for Kitchener making his first appearance, here he is. It's slightly tongue-in-cheek again, like I said, but you know what? We all volunteer. Who volunteers? Well, we do. The first point of reference really is yourself. Whether it's your first season getting involved in a league or a club, or you've been doing this for 25 years and you're now running the club, you're now retired from work and this has almost become a full-time job in retirement of trying to club secretary and keep the club going. At some point, you've decided to take that first step and start volunteering. So it's important to kind of think back about why you volunteered in that very first instance. Because chances are there'll be someone there who is just like you were then, interested to get involved, has that passion for the game, has that passion for the club, is happy to step up to the plate if other people aren't prepared to, and they are that next generation of volunteers. Like I said, although it may sound trite to say, think about why you did it, you are a volunteer first, you're your first frame of reference. Trying to look wider, I'm going to cover off around some advice around looking internally around that volunteer recruitment. Because really, the first point of call will probably be those already involved in the club and those you already know. People involved in the club have a vested interest in keeping it going, we hope, and that loyalty and passion for the club. So they will hopefully be prepared to step up and help out as much as they can. We start looking at adult clubs. First point, you've got players. Let's say you are even a one-team club playing a Sunday league, you're a club team in a Sunday league. Actually, you've got, let's say, 25, 30 players registered with you. 5 or 30 potential volunteers that can help out. And it's important actually to look at some of those older players that may be playing less regularly, maybe getting those slight niggly injuries where they're not able to kind of lace the boots every week. They've been around the club and they're passionate about it and they've been there for 5, 10 years. Maybe they would be happy kind of helping out, keep the club going, keep the team going, and volunteering in a more administrative role or helping out on a match day, even if it's in a non-playing capacity. Equally, in addition to those 30 players, you've potentially got 30 partners, or for those who are playing for their local club from where they grew up, you've got parents and other family members. If they're people that are going down on a weekly basis to support their boyfriend or their girlfriend in playing, then they may be prepared to, as I say, help out, lend a hand on a match day and support on some of those duties, and can be kind of perhaps slowly integrated into volunteering with the club. It's even more important, or perhaps a bigger picture, when you look at youth clubs. Parents are a massive source of volunteers. To say, if you've got the same parents showing up week after week to support their son or daughter playing playing each week, potentially they'll be happy, even if it is providing refreshments or helping out with the team sheet, as a respect officer, setting up the goalposts. Try and integrate parents into it. You know that actually you've got a captive audience for pretty much as long as their child may be playing at the club. And as I mentioned earlier on, older players in youth clubs may also be looking to get involved as a volunteer to help fill out their CV and support applications for jobs, colleges and universities. Nursing then becomes a bit more of an issue, or it's probably harder for leagues in terms of recruiting volunteers. And I know a couple of the leagues that are on this evening have made comments. It's difficult to co-op some of the managers from the league, from the clubs involved in the league, to step up to running the league itself. But certainly that would probably be the first avenue you would look at when trying to recruit volunteers, is see those people that are actively involved with their clubs. See if you can integrate them into helping out. Some of those lines still play. So even if there's older players or parents or partners who aren't actively volunteering with their clubs, if you're a league official and you're out and about on a regular basis watching games, and you start seeing the same people there week after week, engage in a conversation, and maybe they would be happy to lend a hand and start getting involved. Important probably to try and look to spread that the load of volunteering across people. By doing this, you can actually gradually draw people in, drip feeding responsibilities, rather than asking someone to volunteer and suddenly loading the whole responsibility of being a club secretary on their shoulders from the week one. Another huge tactic that you can use when looking at some of the internal recruitment is to use some of the professional skills of those already involved. As I said before, you've got 30 players there, potentially in an adult team. Actually, that's also 30 sets of skills you've got available to you. So, as it says on the screen, if your goalkeeper's an accountant, maybe they're prepared to act as treasurer for the club. Strikers' partner's a nurse at a local hospital or surgery. Maybe they're happy to give up some of their Saturdays and work as a matchday physio. A parent that works for social services, they've already got the skills and the knowledge to make an effective club welfare officer. We said a lot of people are driven by that motivation of wanting to help and wanting to give back to either local community or local club. A huge way of doing that is actually looking at yourself and those skills that you've got, and being able to apply them suddenly to something that you're passionate about. As a club or as a league, you can actually look to try and get ahead of this, perhaps by creating what we refer to here as a skills audit. Now, this can be as formal or informal as you want, whether it's just from having conversations with your players, taking an interest what it is they do for a living, what they get up to in the rest of their spare time, if there are any other skills that they may have which would be of benefit to the club. Or you may look to see it and do it in a slightly more structured way, particularly if you've got a larger club or you're a youth club and looking at 700 parents or something like that who are involved. As a part of your annual registration form, you might ask players or parents to just list what their occupation is. From that, if you do find you've got a need for a treasurer or someone to help out on the club finances, actually you can look through that and see who's got an accounting background and may be willing to help out. It's a real valuable tool there to, as I said, kind of create that audit of experience from within the club. Looking externally now, it can be a bit more of a challenge, I would say, recruiting externally as opposed to from within the club. But it is something that is certainly becoming a lot easier. I'd say that external recruitment probably comes at a slightly higher risk than internal recruitment. Reasons. One is it's probably harder to guarantee their commitments. of individuals coming in, because obviously they are unknown quantities. They're not people that you may have worked with before. You've obviously got to do a lot more around validating that individual and their backgrounds and risks that they may pose. There are, of course, very structured, formal ways you can do that through DBS background checks and so forth. Or even if someone's looking to volunteer for a club, you can, within your rights to ask for references, whether that's for an employer or from personal references, just so that you've done a bit of due diligence and kind of know it's going to be followed. Equally, it can go the other way. Although there may not be emotional attachment, and you may think they may not be as committed, they actually may be more motivated to help out because they are being driven by something other than a feeling that they need to give back, or perhaps that sense that if they don't step up, then the club is going to fold or crumble. So they may be more motivated by gaining that experience because they want to make themselves a more attractive potential employee, or they want to give something back with the skills that they've gained over years of a professional. So if you manage to get the right kind of person, they should still be equally as committed. Just looking now around a couple of the tactics. Looking online, certainly you've got social media, Facebook, Twitter, and so forth, and also online message boards. Most towns, villages, or suburbs and districts within a larger city will have community Facebook groups, which could potentially have thousands of members involved on it. Those groups also attract, and which could be huge, are actually new residents. So I live in Abingdon, where Berks and Bucks are based. I'm on the Abingdon Facebook community group, and you see so often people posting on there that new in town, can anybody recommend ... Can anyone recommend someone to replace my boiler? Someone recommend a dentist to go to? And I have seen it. Can someone recommend a youth club for my new son? A youth club for my son, whether he's new or not. So you've got access there really to new potential volunteers from outside of football, or who have experience in football but are new to the area. It's something that you can definitely look to exploit and to take advantage of. There's also an increasing number of volunteer platforms online where people can sign up just because they're interested in giving back and they're interested in volunteering. As an organisation, you can then post onto that and use that as a way to get new volunteers. Some of the offline, more traditional formats, community notice boards are certainly going to be a massive benefit. Any kind of notice boards that's available around community centres, churches, doctor surgeries, particularly if it's people that are trying to improve their health. Maybe you're interested to see opportunities at local football club, town halls, local gyms, supermarkets. If you think of where you see flyers for that local community play, or for a local yoga session, those are the kind of places you can use. Equally, partner organisations. So if you've got ties to a local business as a sponsor, maybe they can help out on match days on a rotating basis among the staff. And once a month, each member of staff maybe comes down and helps make the teas or cut the oranges at half time, or helps as a match day steward. You can kind of partner with those people that you've already got a relationship with. And equally, you can look at some of the other sports. So summer sports like tennis and cricket, create a relationship with them. You can help out. You may find that football administrators and volunteers, you may be able to help out with them over the summer, and likewise in the winter when they're not active, they may be able to help out, use some of their skills and experience working in sports to help out in football. I looked around avenues of why people volunteer and how you can attract new volunteers. But equally, what's massive for us is around the retention of volunteers and keeping them once they've entered the game. There's a couple of aspects I want to look at here about how to effectively manage volunteers once you've kind of got them on the line and they're taking part in the club. Actually, I think volunteers want to feel valued, feel that they're needed. They want to feel that their involvement is making a difference. Particularly those ones that are being driven by that want to help and to give something back. So they want to know that they're making it. Certainly, they want to be supported. They want to know that they're valued, the club value their input, and happy to support them achieve their goals if they are around gaining additional experience, or that they want to make sure they're not suddenly being hung out to dry and with all this responsibility being loaded onto them without any kind of safety net. Crucially, perhaps most importantly, I think, is understand what's expected of them, what they need to do, and also what that level of commitment is. And really, this is where there's a bit of opportunity to be creative, I would say. You can look at things like role sharing or assisting and shadowing roles to help people develop skills, or have short-term appointments to support someone in an existing role. To a volunteer, that means they know that they only have to sign up for a few weeks or months to provide, let's say, match day support, as opposed to committing to every weekend for the next 10 years of having to be required to go down and do it. You can kind of play around with different tactics to see what is effective, or you have different levels of volunteers, from permanent ones to more casual temporary volunteers. If they're aware of that, what's expected of them, and a commitment is likely to be when they go in, they're much more likely to want to then stay. It will help with that retention. And tied into that is really taking a look at what your club structure is and how some of that load can be shared. This possibly applies more to some of the larger clubs. If you are a massive youth club, and we've got some of them with upwards of 40 youth teams, we try and break some of that responsibility down by having age group coordinators that just manage one or two of those age groups. So rather than having one fixture secretary who's responsible for trying to coordinate all 30 or 40 teams, so you've got 6 or 7 age group coordinators that help out and lighten that load. Equally, you can have a match day secretary to handle the paperwork on the day. Take that out of the hands of the coach who's running around doing 1,001 other things, trying to track of players, set up the posts, set up the nets, and so forth. Actually, take that responsibility of managing the team sheet and give it to somebody else who's there every week already and might be interested in helping out. Those bigger roles around secretaries or treasurers or welfare officers, again, you can look at having assistants to help support them in those duties. Quite a lot of clubs are actually already doing this to some extent, and we're seeing, particularly with the introduction of player registration through whole game system, clubs will have multiple player registration officers, or they may have multiple discipline officers responsible for different aspects of the club, just so they can help stay on top of it. One thing I think is important, again, is around creating that role profile for all the different roles. We have lots of templates on the website and in some of the support documents that we've put out recently to kind of give almost job descriptions or an understanding about what that role is going to entail, but also looks at what that commitment may look like for the volunteer and where they fit into that wider club structure. Almost, it was come clear probably over the last 3 or 5 years is that local community football clubs are increasingly being, or need to adapt to, a more professional outlook. And it is almost a case of looking at yourself as a small business, and how do you then try and operate that in an effective way that you have structure and security in there so that you can help know that you're going to be stable and sustained over a long time. To add a couple of issues of caution around when it comes to volunteering. It's important to remember that volunteers act on the club's behalf and also represent the club. So this is in both a legal and a sporting sense. So if it's a volunteer that's been appointed by the club to a role, they are acting on behalf of that club. Certainly when it comes to FA disciplinary and misconduct procedures, someone's appointed as a club officer, we can take action against them individually, but also we can take action against the club for their behaviour. You are responsible for the way they behave. When you then start looking at some of the wider aspects, particularly around youth football, it becomes even more important if you start looking at safeguarding responsibilities and data handling. An individual, let's say you ask them to help out around the player registration process. That individual now has sensitive information about minors. They have the addresses, dates of birth of players. They've also now become a data handler under GDPR regulations. So it is important that you actually protect yourself as a club by making sure that you have structures in place and formal agreements with that individual, that they know their responsibilities, and you're also trying to remove the liability away from the club and make sure they're responsible for their own actions. That's probably a whole nother webex in its own sense, looking around some of those regulations. But if you do need support around that, please contact us, and we'll. When you are recruiting volunteers and when you are looking at your volunteer structure, there's a couple of things here to think about. At a very bare minimum, you should look to make sure that they all sign up to a code of conduct. That would then explain to them what standards are expected of them, and indeed the consequences if they breach that code of conduct, both in terms that the county FA may take action against them, the national FA may take action. Also, the club may decide that they should be removed from that position either temporarily or permanently if they breach that code of conduct. Probably a better practice would be to have a formal agreement in place with them, where they confirm, or you confirm to them, what their duties are and what the expectations of the club are. And that may well include agreement to abide by club's philosophy. So playing philosophy in youth football, so around, let's say, equal playing time. And it just sets that expectation around what you as a club expect of them and what they can expect in return from you. It's important to think that a single volunteer should not really be bigger than the club, and that ultimately they serve at the management committee's agreements. So again, that's particularly important when you look at youth clubs and some team managers, that quite often the loyalty for players may well be with that team manager, but ultimately they shouldn't be able to hold the club to ransom, because as the parent or as the larger organisation, you've got to look at yourselves. And whilst we're talking about youth clubs, just going to add some of the requirements there around appropriate background checks. Obviously, anybody that has access to children must undergo the DBS process through GB Group. This will make sure that their DBS check is put against their fan number, so that when they are appointed as a youth coach in the whole game system, as the governing body, we're confident that they actually are an appropriate individual to have that responsibility of looking. Key club officers then, that's the, as I mentioned earlier, the chair, the welfare officer, the secretary and the treasurer, must also then complete the online safeguarding for committee members every 3 years. And these kind of issues get picked up and we can support through when it comes to the affiliation and annual health checks for charter standard. Talking of charter standard, the requirements on the left-hand side are mandatory. If you do want to become a charter standard club and show that you are kind of holding yourselves to that higher standard and best practice of what we expect in football, we would look to make sure that all coaches complete the Safeguarding Children workshop or complete the online renewal, and that every team has a level 1 qualification and the ADA. Now, one of the challenges then, particularly if you do have a lot of coaches, is around trying to track of who is doing what. So as with previous sessions, I do have a little bit of a practical demonstration involved, just to kind of look around how, as a club, or you manage some of those qualifications. I have this. You should now see that you've got the whole game system up on the screen. I'm just going to highlight where through the whole game system you can actually keep track of those club officials and team officials and make updates. So here I'm on the main club dashboard. If you navigate down the left-hand side, first of all, I'm just going to look at the club officials tab. This looks at those individuals that have a club-wide role. So it's those essential personnel, the chair, secretary, treasurer, and welfare officer for youth clubs. And then any, as I said, the club-wide role, which are player registration officers or discipline officers. I'll cover, first of all, the key roles. You'll see, although there is an X on the right-hand side of the screen, it's not actually possible to delete somebody from these roles. They're essential roles, they cannot be vacant. If you do get to the point where one of those key officials does leave the club, you'll need to, the only way to replace them or to remove them from the club is by actually replacing them and putting somebody else in that position. So I've gone to a couple of my colleagues and asked for some willing volunteers. So I'm going to give Ellen Hopkins, our Women and Girls Officer, a bit of a promotion right now. when you come to look, two ways of doing it. Search by their fan if you already know it, or you can search by details, and I'll come on to that. So I've put in Ellen's fan and date of birth. I'll come up, click to select her, confirm which club it is, and then what role we're wanting to appoint them into. I'm going to put her as treasurer, and then you select the start date. Start date is today, and click. See that whereas before I was listed in all three roles for the club, now Ellen has been listed as the chair. I'm going to add someone new, a brand new role. As I said, you can search by details if you don't have their fan, so first name, last name, date of birth, and postcode. Or if you do know the fan number, then you can put it in. So I'm just going to do this in my colleague Chris Cole. Our welfare officer, just so that you can see it's up here as the key role. Chris is now in post for that. It cannot delete them. The way to replace someone is or to remove them from the role. Some of these other roles, though, player registration officers or discipline officers, if you do want to remove someone from that role, perhaps if they've left the club and you no longer want them to have access to the player details, come to the pencil mark here. You can input an end date now. Just click OK. See, I've now been removed from. Put me back in there. Straight back into that role. Back in that role. This also means you can do is if you're only appointing someone into a position for a certain length of time, let's say you only want them to have access to the whole game system and this information over the course of the summer, you can put an end date in the future. And this means that next Thursday, I will automatically be removed from that role and no longer. That's the club officials. Moving over to the team officials, areas to look at here. Again, process for adding an official is the same as before. So I'm going to pop Chris now in as goalkeeper coach. He is a very experienced goalkeeper. There he is. You can select which team it relates to. Those of you who have been on previous sessions will know that the demo team that we try and use is goalkeeper coach starting today. He now appears on our list. Game system updates. Now, because these roles are less critical, particularly for adult teams at least, if you do want to remove someone at any time from this, you just have to click the cross, and again, it gives you the option of setting an end date. Now, what's really useful for managing and keeping track of volunteers, particularly when it comes to club affiliations and charter standards, is that through this team officials portal, you can download a qualification report which shows you current qualifications of any of your. If I come on to this, see that are for team roles where they actually are active coaches, so won't include county cup contacts and so forth. Run this qualification report and it instantly shows you who's in what role, what kind of team, what the highest coaching qualification is, if they've got an emergency aid course, if they've completed the safeguarding children course and DBS checks, and then if they've used module. Real valuable tool for keeping track of those qualifications, particularly for youth clubs when it comes to DBSs. What this will also do is flag if any of your qualifications have expired or are due to expire this season. You'll see that we probably all completed our emergency aid course on or around the same session, and they're all going to be expiring around the same time this season, so before the 30th of June 2020. As such, all of our emergency aid qualifications are highlighted in amber, as are our names. If those were valid and current and not expiring over the course of the 2019-20 season, they would not be highlighted and everything black text. Equally, if a DBS had expired, for example, and they are in a role where they require it, then it will be flagged in red, so you know that immediate action has to be taken around that. It's a very valuable tool, and what we would really recommend is when people are appointed to those club roles or to those team roles, actually you've got the tool of the whole game system at your disposal to add them onto the system and keep track of them. A lot of the roles are pre-populated, so whatever kind of role you're adding them into, even if it's as a parent helper, you can put them on the whole game system, and through one place you can manage them. As I said, it's a real valuable tool. For some practical demonstrations this month. We'll head back to the main presentation. Final part of the presentation this evening, I just kind of want to touch on what support we're able to provide here at Berks and what we have in place to try and help clubs out around volunteer recruitment. First up is looking at our website and notice boards that we have in place. We've got 3 notice boards on the website for players, for general volunteer opportunities, and for coaching opportunities. I asked, in preparation for the session this evening, I asked Steph Clark, our communications officer, just to kind of give me some information and statistics around the value of it. So we're looking at, since the 1st of July 2018, so in 18 months or so, we've had 8,500 hits on the player notice board, practically 6,000 hits on the coaches notice board, and over 1,500 hits on the volunteer notice board. So they are websites and they are pages which do get traffic and do get noticed. What's actually quite interesting is then when you look at the number of adverts that have been placed on that to drive some of that traffic. So since the same period of time, 142 player adverts posted, 45 coach adverts posted. Interestingly, only 7 volunteer adverts. Now, obviously, this is highlighted to us that we haven't done a good enough job at promoting it amongst the clubs and as a resource. So we're taking that on board as something that we need to improve on so that we can help our clubs. Actually, if you think about it, those 7 volunteer adverts have been seen by 1,500 people already. So there is the market out there, and there are people, if they're looking to get involved in local football, who will quite often come to the County Football Association and our website as that first point of. Really do recommend sending any adverts you may want posted to us. Everything can be sent through to support@berks-bucksfa.com. Find its way to Steph and it'll get put up for you. I'm sure you're also aware we can support volunteers around training sessions. 2 aspects, formal and informal. So from the formal point of view, obviously we have our coaching courses. So we've got Level 1, Level 2 UEFA B coaching courses on an annual basis. We do emergency aid courses on a regular basis, safeguarding children, and welfare officer workshops. Bursaries are available for some of those courses, particularly at the moment around Level 1 coaching courses for club or for teams that don't have an existing coach with a Level 1 qualification. And those courses, although those courses are generally offered as Berks and Bucks organised courses, either at our offices here or at various hubs around the county, as an open session where anybody can sign up to attend. We will also work with leagues and with larger clubs to arrange standalone courses. So if you are in a position where you've just managed to go through a recruitment drive and bring in 20 brand new volunteers, and you think that as a youth club, best practice would be they all attend a Safeguarding Children workshop, we can work with you to set up a standalone course for that. We also offer, as you may imagine, and hopefully are aware, kind of more informal support and help volunteers. We spent a lot of time over the last year or so really trying to develop the online resources, sort of as a passive resource centre for volunteers, mainly around regulations and how to access and use the whole game system, how to tackle some of those regular queries that crop up on a regular basis. These support sessions are also a part of that, both in terms of being able to attend live in your own time outside of working hours, but also recordings of these being put on our website so that you can access them again in your own time. We're happy to mentor league officials and welfare officers on a one-to-one basis. Larger clubs are happy to do that as well. For the smaller ones, we'll do it if we're available. And we're also constantly innovating and adapting new technologies to help share information and support volunteers. So we've got things like Live, which is an online membership platform where you can look to crowd solve issues. And so we'll post on there as well. We'll try and help out with issues, but equally coaches or welfare officers can put our questions to each other and kind of solve it amongst themselves. We also then work with clubs and leagues around charter standard development plans to help try and sustainable growth. The development team will go out and about the county with clubs, trying to look at some of that bigger picture, longer term planning. I'm also happy to come and deliver this or any of the other BBFA support presentations at league meetings. I've done similar presentations to this a few years ago in North Berks, and I believe in the Aylesbury District League. Certainly with the introduction of sim bins this season, between myself, Lisa Ben, and Chris Penny, we've gone out to every single league across the county to deliver training sessions, and we're happy to attend any league meetings that come up. If there's an issue, let us know. We'll be able to find someone from the office who should be able to attend and kind of provide support and training for secretaries or team managers or whoever it may be. And I just want to try to recap, as I always do, with some of the most practical advice we can provide here at the county and the leagues to try and take away, think about, and digest. Really, the key 4 pieces of advice I probably offer around volunteer recruitment. Try and spread the load. If people are able to help a little and often, it may make them more keen to support and keen to stay involved than if they either have to support a lot and rarely, or a lot and often. And actually spreading that load will also mean that you've got a bit of sustainability and longevity there. Succession planning is a key issue. It's highlighted as one of the main challenges facing volunteers. Actually, if you've got lots of people within the club that have spent some time shadowing various volunteers in different roles, you've got someone that's a ready-made club secretary or chair ready in the wings that can step up. Second is be smart. Look within the club and see who's already got the skills that may be able to help out, particularly if there's a crucial area you're looking to try and work on. As I said, if you've got potentially 30 players, another 60 family members who may be willing to get involved, and in there may be lucky enough to have a couple of accountants who can help out as treasurer, or social workers who can help out as welfare officers, senior business executives who can take on a role like chair, or someone that's been a career administrator but may have just retired and wants to take a secretarial role. Take a look and do that skills audit, see who's already within the club and may be able to offer a bit of extra hand. Third, make sure those roles are clearly defined and volunteers sign an agreement. So it's important to set expectations from both sides as to what that role is going to look like when someone comes into it, and gives a bit of support and structure there so that volunteers don't feel that they've suddenly been hung out to dry, or that they aren't being supported and don't know what they should be. Make those roles clearly defined and set those expectations. It will help. Having volunteers sign an agreement is definitely best practice, and I'd really urge clubs to. The support session next month is going to look around handling internal complaints. It's not particularly pleasant conversation to have. Actually, one of the challenges that some clubs have faced is that volunteers aren't aware of what is expected of them, or if they don't uphold their end of the bargain, as it were, that again, by having them sign an agreement, all of that is put on the table. equally, if that volunteer is going to have access to player data, so names, dates of birth, addresses, and so forth, and they should have signed some kind of agreement just to make sure that everything. Final piece of advice then, review the qualifications on a regular basis. This is obviously most important for youth clubs and youth leagues, because it means that the affiliation process or the charter standard process will become a breeze. As I said, you've got that team qualification report system. Recommend reviewing that probably on a monthly basis so that you're aware of whose DBS check may be expiring over the next 30 to 60 days, and you can get an application in good time. Not then running the risk of the team being suspended by the county because it's gone non-compliant, and you know that when the next season's affiliation comes up, you'll be able to go straight through time of asking. Did want some further resources. As I said, a lot of the information I've taken today has come from National Council of Voluntary Organisations. Their website offers background information as well as kind of trends around volunteering, guidance documents and templates for volunteer agreements. It's a wealth of other sources, so definitely recommend checking them out. Whilst we're talking volunteers, we at Berks and Bucks are currently in the process of trying to develop and define our volunteer strategy. It's a bit of an awkward position, or not awkward, but an interesting position for us, because we're not the ones directly recruiting or appointing volunteers. Obviously, as the governing body, we do have a duty and a responsibility to support our clubs and leagues in doing so, and to support the volunteers once they've been appointed to a post. So really what we're looking to do is create a clearly defined commitment to our clubs and our leagues and our volunteers. We'll talk about what training we offer, what support we offer, and what benefits they get from being a volunteer within the Berks and Bucks community. I'm going to be sending a survey out to all club and league volunteers later this month. Appreciate everyone's just gone through the FA's grassroots football survey, but this will be slightly more tailored towards Berks and Bucks, and give us a bit direct feedback really from our volunteers around their backgrounds and what they'd like to see from us. Currently considering a couple of different packages or support offerings for volunteers, so really help define that, and we'll hope to get that launched ahead of next season. Finally, as mentioned before, all of our BBFA support sessions are now available online, so if you missed any of the first 3 sessions, want to go back, you can find it on our website under Club Management and BBFA Support. Hope to get this session up there in the next couple of weeks or so, along with the slides from this evening and a couple of the other resources and links we've talked about. Next session then will be in a month's time, the second Thursday of the month, 12th of December, 7 o'clock. And as mentioned earlier, we'll look around managing internal complaints. It's something that's come up as an increasingly difficult issue for clubs in the county. We've done a lot of work with a couple of individual clubs, creating some guidance and some best practice and supporting them through clubs. I feel like it would be a good topic to discuss in this kind of forum so that information gets out a little bit wider. That is it for the presentation this evening. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to drop them in the chat. I'll see if I can offer any responses. But if not, just wanted to say thank you again for joining us this evening. I hope you found it useful. Hope it's kind of put some different perspective on volunteer recruitment, some new ideas and advice around it. If you want to reach out, my information's on the screen right now. You're welcome to contact me directly. And as a league, like I said, if you want me to come and deliver this in person to your clubs to try and get that message out a bit more, happy to do so. Other than that, thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the England game. Thank you.